Hi, welcome to Whitney Talk Sunday with Amanda Ludwig.
Hey everyone.
I am so excited to have you on the Whitney Talk Sunday.
Hey everyone.
I am so excited to have you on the Whitney Talk Sunday.
Hey everyone.
I'm so sorry, guys. Okay, is it better now?
I think so.
Was there like some weird volume or something going on?
Yeah, there's some feedback.
Right now, is still some feedback?
Yeah. Yeah, there's some feedback.
Do you have any apps open on your computer?
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like,
we figured it out, y'all.
Lord. So we are still figuring out. Every week it gets lovelier because I'm just figuring out with everybody I'm interviewing how to work this YouTube broadcasting thing. So I have the pleasure of speaking with Amanda today. Amanda, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Whitney. I'm so proud of what she's doing with Whitney Soul Talk Sundays, and I'm really honored to be a part of this. I've known Whitney since she was 14 years old, and I'm so proud of the woman that she's become. And so my name is Amanda Ludwig. I am a Jesus follower. I am a woman. I am a daughter. I'm a friend. And I am a licensed professional counselor. I'm a mentor. I'm a musician. And I drive for Lyft and Uber. Can't leave that out.
Okay, so Amanda, you said you're a licensed counselor. What's the difference between therapist and counselor? Is it the same or?
Yeah, so those two terms are interchangeable. Different people in the field use different terms, but when it concerns a licensed professional counselor, what that means is that we have gone through the state in which we live, which for me is Pennsylvania, in order to obtain official licensure through taking a test as well as earning hours and having so many supervisory hours in order to officially say that we're licensed in order to practice counseling. So if someone says that they are a therapist, that could mean that they have their license, or it could mean that they don't have their license. They may have their master's degree, but haven't officially gotten their license. We can still practice the same things. The main difference is that licensed professional counselors, along with licensed social workers and licensed marriage and family therapists, can actually bill insurance in order to receive services, whereas those who do not have their license can't.
Mm-hmm. So Amanda, now that you cleared that, so people can understand that you are licensed, you are well educated on counseling on all different aspects, or just you have
a specific expertise. So I practice from a very general mental health perspective. So I can counsel anyone from severe mental illness like schizophrenia and the autism spectrum, and different things of that nature, to just general mental health concerns like anxiety and depression, and PTSD, postpartum depression. I can do a range of children to adults. My particular areas of expertise and passion are surrounding women's issues, which include anxiety and depression, but also traumatic experiences from, whether it's from childhood or all the way up until adulthood. Throughout our life, we have a tendency to experience, everybody typically has experienced something that has been life altering, or has kind of shaken up their belief system. And so my area is to really help people heal from those experiences.
So Amanda, I'm going to rewind it back a little bit. Now that you expressed exactly what you do and what you cater towards, I want to know, like, how did you come about? Like, is this a passion of yours, or is this something that you did because? What was the reason behind it?
Sure. So I think from a very young age, I knew that I loved people and that I loved to help people. I knew from some of my own experiences growing up. For example, I was bullied as a child, and I went through a period in my teenage years where I really didn't see the purpose of living. I really didn't have much hope to continue to go through life, because I just couldn't see the light at the time. And thankfully for me, I wasn't particularly suicidal, but I would pray at night that God would not allow me to wake up in the morning, because I just didn't see the purpose for being here. And so having gone through that experience, and obviously the Lord didn't answer my prayer, which I'm grateful for today. But having had that experience, I really came to, over time, believe that I wanted to help people. And so it was a combination of knowing that, but also my career journey didn't start out as doing therapy per se. But I got my bachelor's degree in music, and then I worked for an organization called Urban Impact with young people on the north side of Pittsburgh, which is where I met Whitney. And through that experience in performing arts and getting to know the young people there, and hearing a lot of the different things that they were experiencing, having them in Bible study, and just hearing some of their stories really inspired me to go back and get further education so that I could continue to help young people to overcome some of the same things that I overcame, but also some additional things that I did not experience as a young person. So that's really my faith has also inspired this journey that I've been on, because my faith is something that really actually, I would say, saved my life in terms of giving me hope to want to live and to want to know that there was more to life than what I was feeling in that moment. In recent years, of course, as I became educated, I also learned that many teenagers experience those kinds of thoughts and that kind of depression, those kinds of feelings of despair, just because of the developmental stage that they're in. And I did not obviously know that at the time. But there are so many different things that we go through as people. And so my passion has been inspired by my faith and also my work experience.
Okay. That's deep. I mean, just you expressing, from a victim perspective, you were bullied, you experienced certain things, and why not go and cater to the people who you know is not getting the help they need. So that's just great. And I'm happy that you're passionate about doing that. you are expressing your passion towards it. So my question to you is, when it comes to being in this field, where do you actually see the need for the help?
I see need everywhere. But to be specific, in terms of what my particular passion is, once I got my master's degree, I ended up working in the criminal justice system for 5 years after having worked at Urban Impact for several years. And so I worked with at-risk population, with young people. And then I worked with the incarcerated population. And through working in both of those spheres, really recognized some themes that were sticking out for me. So when I worked in the jail, I worked with the women. And one of the things that I saw over and over again was that they had experienced trauma as young people, and they never had the opportunity or the resources or the support to really make sense of their stories. And another theme that I saw was that many of the women that I encountered were at one point in time in foster care as children. And so as a result of and these are broad generalizations, of course, but where I really see the need is to work with the foster care population in particular, to really help them make sense of the abandonment that they often experience, the neglect that they often experience, and really helping them to know that there is more to life than just surviving. That population tends to be very resilient because they've had to be. They had to figure out how to survive, how to, live, how to navigate the world. But as a result of being in survival mode, they also don't always know that there is more to life than just survival, because of the lack of exposure, the lack of resources, the lack of care and compassion at times, especially when they have entered into a criminal justice system that labels them as criminals. And so that's where my particular passion is, in really being able to work with that population to help prevent at this point, so I'm no longer in the jail. And my goal is to help prevent foster care youth from entering into the criminal justice system or becoming homeless or becoming addicted or getting into unhealthy relationships and things of that nature. So that's my particular passion, but really the need is everywhere because as people, every culture, every population, every system has unique struggles and concerns. They also have unique strengths, but every humans, we're in need of support and care and compassion and the ability to heal from the things that we've experienced in life.
It's just powerful because you said a lot, and it's just like I want to touch on everything. However, just knowing that you worked in the criminal justice system, which is you worked in the Allegheny County Jail, right? And you're dealing with a lot of people who may not even look like you or feel like you are privileged, because it's like maybe you don't understand where I came from, or you don't understand me, you just this white lady, How is that like interaction? How do you reach the people who feel like you just don't understand?
Sure. So that was something I was super concerned about when I first entered the position, because one, I grew up in the country where I did not experience a whole lot of crime. There was some, but there wasn't a lot. And so there was really, I didn't know very much about the criminal justice system. Two, I was hired to teach a parenting class to mothers as a single non-parent. And I also taught relationship classes, and I was not married or in a relationship. And so I had a lot of concerns about whether or not what I had to offer would be relevant. But what I came to understand is that the women were so hungry to be heard, bottom line. And so as I taught the parenting classes, as I connected with them, as I had phone calls and visits with their children and their families, the more that I listened to their stories and the more that I helped them to learn how to communicate and express, the things that they were experiencing, the more that they respected me. And the thing that I really learned through that experience was that I myself, and there's no one in the world who has experienced everything that everybody else has experienced. But what we as people are really longing for is someone who will listen and be able to hear our story. What's that?
Empathize with them.
And empathize, exactly. And so I remember at one point in time, one of my colleagues was really struggling in terms of receiving respect from the individuals in the class. And they were expressing how they really wanted, them to call them by a formal name. And I'm not being gender specific because I don't want to, out anybody, but they wanted to be called by a formal name, and we're like, how did you get them to call you Miss Amanda? And as I was reflecting back on how that came to be, I realized that I never asked them to actually call me that. So there were women of all cultures, all ages. I mean, I had like 65, 75-year-old women referring to me as Miss Amanda, and I had never asked them to call me that. But I realized that they did so because I was willing to hear them, because I wasn't demanding respect based on my position, but I was commanding their respect because they knew that I cared about them. And there's a lot to be said about that. I also didn't assume that I already knew what they had experienced. And that also goes a long way. So when I started classes, I would always start with being transparent about who I am and where I came from, and being able to say, I don't know everything about your situations, where you came from, but I hope that you will teach me. I want to partner with you in this experience. I have some things to offer, but I really want to learn from you too.
That's deep, because as people, sometimes we are so quick to respond, and we really didn't listen. And that's something that I feel like we can elaborate on more today, because a lot of people aren't listening. To people's mental health, to people's depression, to people's post-traumatic stress, all that. People aren't listening. And so that's another reason why I have Sundays, is because I want people to hear. I want them to internalize. I want them to feel. And I want them to understand that, yes, you may not have been through this, or you may be going through this, but you're not the only one in the situation. And there's someone like Amanda that can help you. And it's okay for you to seek help.
Yeah.
So I think that I would like you to go more on getting people to understand that listening is a big deal.
Yeah. So there's something that is called active listening as opposed to just listening. So a lot of times when we are in a conversation with somebody, we're just having a dialogue. A lot of times we are listening from the perspective of preparing ourselves to give a defense or to respond before we've actually heard everything that that person has to say. And that's not active listening. Active listening is really being able to kind of shut down actually your defense or your thought process in order to really hear the person from beginning to end, to hear the complete context of what they're trying to say, to really hear their story, to hear their heart. And so active listening requires you to put yourself to the side for just a moment, until you can really hear what the other person is saying and be able to reflect back to them that you have heard the heart of the message. And once you have done that, then you have the opportunity to share your experience and your perspective and what's on your heart. And hopefully the other person will be actively listening to that. Another part of active listening is being able to pay attention to nonverbal cues. Because actually, I can't remember the exact percentage, but I think it's something like 75 to 80% of communication is actually nonverbal. And what that means is that communication, 80% of communication is not in what we are saying, but it's in our body language, it's in our face, it's in our hand gestures, all those kinds of things. And so someone may use words to communicate, but because of their body language, you may hear something else. And so part of active listening is also paying attention to nonverbal communication, but also checking in with nonverbal communication, because you can assume something by how somebody looks that isn't accurate. One of those examples is like if someone has their arms crossed, that can indicate that they're not really interested in the conversation. It can indicate that they're closed off, like they don't want to be a part of the conversation. Or it can indicate that they're just cold and they're trying to get warm. And so if you as the listener are looking at them and seeing that their hands are crossed and you're interpreting that they're not interested in the conversation, then you can begin to communicate from a perspective that isn't accurate when they may just be trying to get warm. So there's a lot more that goes into listening than just waiting to respond to what the other person is saying.
It's funny that you said that, because you learn body language in some classes that you are taught in college. Like, this is one of the things that you learn first, right? And it's funny that you said that, because whenever I see people doing that, I'm talking, right? I feel like I get on the fence. And I never ever thought about it as them being So that's just a lesson learned for me, and not always assuming, which is good. It's just a different perspective.
Yeah. So going along with that, a really good way to also actively listen, this isn't one thing I mentioned, but is to ask questions. So for example, if someone has their arms crossed, you can say, I noticed that your arms are crossed, and I'm just wondering, what's going through your mind right now? So they will then be able to connect and say, oh, this person's really paying attention. to me, and they want to know what's going on beyond what I'm saying. So that is a way that you cannot assume and check in.
Okay, I gotta try it. But so on my Whitney Talks, I'll be interviewing people who have been through different things, from post-traumatic stress to DHL to molestation, to abuse, to all those different levels. Those will be coming up soon. I would like for you, before I even get into that, that's why I wanted to interview you before I interview them, just to express to the people who will be viewing that, and they feel uncomfortable, that the message isn't to make them feel uncomfortable, but it's to make them to get to a point where they're feeling healed. They can empathize. They can help someone who been through a situation, or maybe going through a situation, and they know the signs. So basically, to get awareness. You know how you have the front view mirror, and then you have your side view mirrors, and then you have whatever. Right? You want to be well-rounded in all areas. So, I just basically want people to get it from a licensed professional perspective that is not trying to expose people, but it's just trying to gain some healing.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, in life, many of us, if not all of us, have experienced very difficult, earth-shattering, life-shattering, things that we were not prepared to be able to deal with and understand. And so when those things happen, what can happen for anyone who's experienced any kind of abuse, whether it's sexual, emotional, mental, psychological, or physical, anyone who's experienced having a mentally ill parent, or being through a divorce, or having lost a grandparent or a loved one at a young age, or their peers consistently to gang violence or murder, a number of these different issues. What tends to happen when they don't have an outlet, when we don't have an outlet to talk about those things, is that we internalize them, and we become ashamed, or we become hardened by the things that happen in life. And so one of the ways to really heal from a lot of those experiences, or learn how to tap into the purpose in the pain, is what I like, a phrase that I use a lot, is to begin to share those experiences with someone who is trained and trusted, to be able to make sense of what happened to you, not only when that experience occurred, but then the things that you began to believe as a result of those experiences happening. Because a lot of times when we have experienced abuse, a lot of people will internalize that and believe that they were wrong, or that they did something wrong in order to invite that abuse. And in reality, what often happens is that people have been victimized for one reason or another, because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, or because someone who was older than them caught them in a vulnerable state, or someone who had power over them caught them, or someone who just didn't know any better because they didn't experience their own history, did something to them, then if we don't have an outlet to talk about that and understand it and name it. I also talk a lot about naming things, because if we don't have a name for the things that have happened to us, if we're not able to bring it into the light, then a lot of times we'll remain in that victimized state. And we may not want to be there, but we don't necessarily know on our own how to move past being victimized into being a victor and overcoming the things that have happened to us.
Now you said victor. I'm sure a lot of people don't know what a victor is. And I would like you to elaborate on that, because I am now a victor and no longer a victim.
Yeah.
And I would like for you to get people to understand that it's okay to not relive those experiences anymore once they're out of it. And to forgive and become that victim.
Yeah. So when I talk about becoming a victor, what I mean when I say that is being able to find the purpose in the pain. And so a lot of times when we've experienced those kinds of things in our lives, we can live in a place where we are continuing to replay those things, or we feel very bitter or depressed, anxious, believing that nothing is ever going to change, or that we deserved this treatment, whatever the case may be. But becoming a victor is being able to say, this is something that I experienced, but this does not define me. What defines me is being able to make sense of what happened and how this shaped me, and then being able to share my story to help other people who have experienced similar things overcome and live a life that is abundant, and that is being able to thrive as a result of the things that have happened. So it's really just being able to look and say, these things happened to me and they had a profound impact on me, but they do not define me. Exactly. There's a scripture in the word that says we overcome by the word of our testimony. And so if we never experienced going through any sufferings and trials, then we wouldn't have a testimony to share. And if we didn't have a testimony to share, then we couldn't overcome. And so being able to overcome those eyebrows, you're killing me with. Being able to overcome means that we have a testimony to share about the things that we have experienced in life. And when we share, because a lot of times we're able to overcome the things that we've been through because someone else who is a victor already or has overcome has shared their testimony. And so it's a thing that should become a cycle in our lives, where those who have gone before us are sharing their testimony in order to help those who come behind them in order to heal from the things that they've experienced. We weren't meant to continue to live in a state of feeling like we're just surviving. The word says that he has called us to life and life abundant, and that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb. And so God, and this could get into a whole other discussion, But a lot of people, and understandably so, would say, why did God allow these things to happen? If there's a good God, then why is there evil in the world? And those are very deep and very important questions, and questions that God himself can handle. And I'm not a theologian, so I don't have like a theological, a well-defined theological answer for that. But my belief is that when evil entered the world, that is what has caused all of these things. But we, as people of God, have the ability to overcome evil, because God sent his son Jesus to die on the cross so that we could live life and life abundant. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean that it's not a lot of hard work. It doesn't mean that it doesn't produce a lot of destruction in our lives. But what it does mean is that we have the opportunity to move out of that pain into purpose.
So when people listen to you, mm-hmm. I want them to listen to you from a perspective of I would like people to just basically embrace what you're saying and understand that if they aren't faith-based, just understand that we all have hurdles. Mm-hmm. And get over those hurdles, and to push through those hurdles, we have to have some type of faith within ourselves. Mm-hmm. God, the universe, mm-hmm. anything that we put our belief, mm-hmm. whatever we believe, mm-hmm. and whatever comes our way, mm-hmm. we can get through it. Mm-hmm. Because without the test, mm-hmm. we wouldn't have a testimony. Mm-hmm. Nothing easy is appreciated. Mm-hmm. And I want people to understand that sometimes it's a capsule. It's something that's going to give you that extra push or that extra motivation, mm-hmm. to get to where you need to get to in your life.
Yeah.
And people think that this journey is a destination.
Mm-hmm.
But when he say life is a journey, it's always something, mm-hmm. that's happening.
Yeah.
And and I wanted to do this program for 21 Sundays because I want people to actually be healed and hear the stories and hear the message, mm-hmm. that it is that's needed to push through whatever they are going through.
Yeah.
And to uplift one another.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm seeing now that mental health mm-hmm. is becoming well pronounced. It's evolving.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people have it. And they're not dealing with it.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid, they're ashamed, they feel like it's just I'm everywhere because it's like
mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of social stigma surrounding mental health and understanding what mental health really is. for many, many years, and I still hear people saying this even when they come to session, you know, like, do you think I'm crazy? Like, a lot of people think that if you say that you struggle with mental health, then that automatically means that you are crazy. Um, Whatever crazy, however that's defined. And really, from the perspective of mental health, it could be anything as small as going through a transition from, you know, your teenage years to young adulthood, to something, you know, quote unquote bigger, like going through a divorce, you know. Um, you may have symptoms of anxiety or symptoms of depression, for a season of life, and it may not be something that lasts, you know, that's ongoing, but that's still a mental health struggle. And it may be something that's ongoing, but that does not make you crazy. um, Life is hard. This world that we live in, there's so much happening. There's so much that we're exposed to. There's so much that we experience before we're able to have the tools to develop and understand what it is that's happened. And so that can create a lot of, you know, struggle. And so there is no shame in seeking out help. Um, the one thing that I will say that is really important when it comes to seeking out help is seeking out the right help. And what I mean by that is just that it's really important to have a therapist, or a pastor or anyone who you're going to for help, that you feel that you can trust and connect with. Because if you don't feel that you can trust or connect with that person, then you're wasting your time and your resources. In life, we don't connect with everybody. The first session of counseling with all of my clients, I say, if you, you know, at some point in time feel that I'm not the right fit for you, I want you to let me know, because this is your time and your resources, and your healing is important. And if I'm not the right fit, then we need to find you the right fit. And so that's something that is really important in seeking out help.
And then another thing is that people don't know how to go about it. Can you give them the structure of how to go about seeking legal help or help? Licensed help.
Yes. It's okay. So there are a number of different ways that you can seek help. I know here in Allegheny County, we have a resource line called 211, that anybody can call and ask for, you know, whatever service you feel that you would need, whether it's counseling, or help with housing, or help with food, any of those kinds of things. You can call the resource line 211 for that help. In terms of counseling, there are many different nonprofits and practices that you can reach out to in order to determine, you know, what would be the best fit. You can do a Google search, or you can look up different services online in order to determine what the feedback is about those services. In particular, I work for an organization called the Grace Wellness Center, which is based in Irwin, Pennsylvania, but we partner with different churches throughout Western PA. And so on 3 days of the week, I'm at several different locations myself, but we also have about 10 to 15 counselors that are at different locations that you can access help for. When it comes to the financial aspect of seeking counseling, there are a number of different things to be considered. Some organizations or agencies have what is called a sliding scale, which means that if you do not have insurance, they will offer a sliding scale fee out of pocket based on your income or based on what you are able to afford. And so that's something to consider asking if you don't have insurance. If you do have insurance, then, the best way to go about that is to ask if they accept your insurance, so that you can, get the best care with the resources that you have. There are also different types of counseling. So individual is when you are just speaking alone with one therapist. There's also group counseling, which could be in a group setting with one therapist, speaking about a particular issue. There's also family counseling. There's couples counseling. There are a number of different healing opportunities to to be more interactive with counseling. So like music therapy, there's something called Splunkna, which is a deeper healing Christian version of being able to explore some things that you've done that you believe subconsciously. And so there are a number of different opportunities within the counseling field.
Oh, okay. Thank you for sharing the different venues of getting help and seeking help. So for my people who are viewing today or in the future, would you mind providing your card or information so that they can call you if they are experiencing any type of mental or any type of issues within themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. The website for the organization I work for is www.thegracewellnesscenter.com. And my personal email is Ludwig, that's LUDWIG .lpc. So aludwig.lpc@gmail.com. My number is 412-330-1133. You could contact me through any of those different contact information. Yeah.
And I'll put that into the description after we end this live. Amanda, I do appreciate you coming on to live today. You were very informational. I think this was a great way to start off next week's Sunday's talk, because it will be getting intimate and personal. And I just came up with something in my head. So the men seeking help.
Yeah.
With counselors, how can we encourage men to get help and not make them feel like they're less of a man because they're getting help? I just feel like I have to touch on that.
Yeah. So I think one way to go about it is to, if you are a woman who cares about the men in your life, or, feels that they would benefit from counseling, I think one approach is to really be able to show them or have them hear stories from other men who have actually experienced counseling, and that they're able to hear the impact that it's had. Because a lot of times the social stigma is even greater surrounding men, and they just really need to see, some other individuals who have experienced it and believe that it's beneficial. I think, if you are a man, I just want to encourage you that being able to go to counseling does not make you weak. It actually makes you strong. And that's true for men and women. But particularly for men, it seems that they, you know, when I hear men and I see men, it seems that they really struggle to enter into counseling because they're afraid that it will make them look weak, or that they won't know how to talk about their feelings and their emotions, because a lot of times men have been socialized not to, you know, be able to express their emotions, or if they do express an emotion, it's most of the time anger. And so that's not necessarily men's fault. It's just the way that we as a society have shaped men to express themselves. But there is more to, there's so much goodness in being able to be vulnerable and transparent with those that you love. And you are able to learn how to do that. It's something that will be welcomed with people who really care about you. So.
Okay. Because I just had to ask that. Because, you know, there's a lot of men I see that are going through things on a day-to-day basis. And if you're really listening to them, you can see it through their body language and their actions, how they feel like they're going through something.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I definitely wanted to ask that question.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to end this on a great note. Do you have a quote or anything to share?
Yeah, I do. I have two things. So one, the quote that I have that I thought about that I've kind of based my entire career on was something that Helen Keller said. And Helen Keller was a woman who was blind and deaf. And it's important to have that context to understand the significance of what she said. So as she was going about doing a lot of incredible work throughout her life, she at one point in time said, "I am only one, but I am still one. I cannot do everything, but just because I cannot do everything does not mean that I will refuse to do the something that I can do." And so that is something that I have been inspired by and have carried with me, because this work can feel overwhelming at times. But I am constantly trying to regain perspective and know that the work that we do is important, and that I don't have to reach everyone. But if I reach one, and that person reaches one, and that person reaches one, then we'll be working together to make a huge difference in the world. So that's my quote. And then I have a shameless plug. I don't. That may not be appearing correctly on the screen because I think it's backwards. But can you see it? So this book, Becoming Miss Burton, by a woman named Susan Burton, I would highly recommend for anyone to read regarding one woman's experience through the criminal justice system. Susan Burton is a woman that I met several years ago from LA, and she recently, within the last year and a half, released this book, and it is phenomenal. And so if you want to understand more about the impact of the criminal justice system on women, this is the book to read. It also details a lot about the cultural I can't think of the word at the moment. Yeah, the cultural. I'm sorry.
I'm trying to say difference, diversity, culture shock, stigma.
The amount of African American people who experience the criminal justice system, as opposed to white individuals and other minorities, African Americans experience it at a much greater rate. And so she talks a lot about the statistics of that and where some of that came from, and how she is helping to move the movement forward to end mass incarceration in the US. So Becoming Miss Burton, it's an excellent book.
Yay! So you guys go get Becoming Miss Burton. Highly recommended by yours truly, Amanda Ludwig. Thank you again, you guys, for tuning in this Sunday for Whitney Talk Sunday. I hope you all enjoyed the broadcast. I am still getting used to YouTube. It feels like every time I talk, myself is talking back to me. So, you know, I am working with it. But you all have a wonderful Sunday. Talk to you next Sunday.
Thank you, Whitney.